Hello, CIS25. In this video, this is part 1 of Unit 3 lecture or Chapter 3. We are going to talk about cables and including network cables along with your USB and other types of cable and ports. So in this chapter, it begins with talking about network cables, and in the first week, we actually created cable. Ethernet cable is used to connect your system to your local area network. At home, you might use your Ethernet cable to connect to your LAN. So you would see that your Ethernet cable is divided to different categories. Cat5e, Cat6, and Cat6a is your standard cabling grades, and they're suitable for your 10BASE-T or fast Ethernet networking. Cat6, Cat6a, and Cat7 are compatible to support 10 gig BASE-T, which is faster transfer rate. So the below table gives you the comparison from different type of cable. So Cat3 is what you see with telephone connection back then, and it was also a copper type cable. It uses RJ11, which is your typical telephone connector. It's smaller than your Ethernet connector. Cat5 is when we transition to fast Ethernet, and your speed is going to be 100 megabit per second. So it's 10 times faster than what you see with Cat3. Then Cat5e is used with, that will be 1000 megabit per second, which is what you see in many of the networks today, along with Cat6 and Cat6a. So Cat6 connects at 1000 megabit per second, and Cat6a is at 10 gigabit per second, and Cat7 is also at 10 gigabit per second. Now, the difference in Cat6a and Cat7 is that the connector is different, where Cat7 uses GG45 connector, and Cat6a is an enhance of Cat6, which uses RJ45. So the gauge wire pair is a little bit different between Cat6 and Cat5. So what you see is that we do have different throughput with different type of cable. So in the first question of your assignment, it asks you which categories of network cables are used for gigabit Ethernet. We can say that Cat5e, Cat6, and Cat6a is used in gigabit Ethernet, and the throughput for that is 10 gigabit per second. Now, your standard cable is made for fire rating, so that will be your standard cable for fast Ethernet. So going back to your notes, in the subsequent section, it talks about standard and plenum. So there are two categories for the twisted pair cable that would be fire rating. Your standard cable is suitable for patched cables, which between your network interface card and your network jack that could be at the wall. And that jack is then going to go to the patch panel. So you would use your standard cable that you can purchase from the store. It has a PVC jacket. Now, when that catches fire, it's going to cause a lot of smoke. So in order to prevent hazardous to the human health, we would then use plenum cable. And plenum cable we would use that in elevator shaft, in ventilation shaft, in suspended ceiling or permanent ceiling, or we would use it in the subfloor to run the cable. Plenum cable produce less smoke, so the plenum grade cable is recommended to run in those space. The jacket is different. It uses Teflon, and it is a modified version of your standard cable, which is better to be implemented in ceiling and floor area. Your cable also is classified as either twisted pair or unshielded twisted pair. The unshielded twisted pair doesn't have a metal foil or braid that would be covering. So twisted pair, the advantage of that would be that there would be less interference when you have a large group of cables connecting together. Where unshielded twisted pair, it will emit some there would be some noise and interference when you have many cables connecting together. So the interference is considered the electromagnetic interference, and EMI would to prevent EMI, we would use shielded compared to unshielded twisted pair. So when we created the cable, we would see the twisted copper, and that's what it got its name with the twisted pair. Now the standard that you would use is shown here. So on a regular Ethernet cable, we would use standard B on both ends of our cable when we insert it to the connector, and our connector is the RJ45. When we're using crossover cable, which is used to connect PC to PC, hub to hub, and so on. So when you're using the same type of device connection, you would use crossover. One side is going to be the standard B, and the other side is going to be the standard A, where it's crossed differently. So therefore the name crossover. And you would see the color coding based on the copper coat. So you want to follow that when you create your cable. Another type of cable is your fiber optic. This is using light to transmit with the electrical signal. And fiber can be classified under the single mode, in that it would have thin core between 8 to 10 microns. It's designed to only carry one single ray, but for long distance. It's up to 60 kilometer or even further. So single mode is using laser for the light source, and it's used for cable TV and telephone companies to connect between cities and towns. For the multi-mode fiber, it has a thicker core that will be 62.5 microns. And comparing to the single mode, the multi-mode uses multiple light rays, and it uses LED instead of laser. And that's the main difference. It is also less than, in distance, it cannot carry as long as what you see in the single mode. So it carries less than 60 kilometer, approximately 36 miles. So when you're looking at the type of fiber that we want to use, it's also pertaining to the physical distance. And that way we can look at what we need to purchase in order to connect for our network. So fiber optic also have different connector. So for the first one on the left, you would see that it used SC is the square connector, and SE is used, it's pretty common for fiber optic. And then your LC, it also uses square connector, and ST uses round connector. So the number 1 is what you see with SC, and number 3 on the far right is going to be your LC, and the one in the middle is what's called the ST. Then you also have duplex fiber. So duplex type of cable is able to send and receive simultaneously. When you're looking at simplex or half duplex can send and then receive. So it's one after the other, where simplex can only send or receive. So it can only either receive or send. So here it shows you the picture of the different type of connector for fiber. And another type of cable that we created was the coaxial. And the coaxial is the oldest type of network cable. It would be used for television connection. It would be used for also internet and satellite TV connection, CCTV. This is what's classified under 10 base 5, and 10, like we said before, means the speed. Base is going to be the number after base is going to pertain to the type of cable. So coaxial is divided into two categories, your thin net and your thick net. Thin net is going to be low cost. This is going to be for using 10 base T using a different connector RG58. Now for the BNC connector, that would be using for coaxial, we would use BNC connector for the coaxial. And if you're using the thin net, that will be RG58. This is older. So some of the adapter that you see back then is capable to connect to a coaxial, like what is seen in the picture. You would then use the thin net cable to connect to the BNC connector, and that's how we were able to transmit data. Later on, we would see that there is also the RG59 connector. This is using with a higher gauge, 22 gauge in the center. So the signal is using a different frequency at 50 megahertz. Then also the RG6, which uses the same connector as RG59, but it has slightly larger diameter and dual shielding. This is also used for TV, internet, satellite TV, and so on. So in the lab, we actually use RG6, and RG6, it uses 18 gauge for the center conductor, and it can carry signal further than 59. So the signal frequency for the RG6 is 1.5 gigahertz compared to RG59. It is at 50 megahertz, a lot less. So BNC connector is what we use to when we make the cable. So BNC connector would then be compressed into the cable, and you would see the needle coming through. So the one on the left that you see in the picture is what's considered an F connector. The one on the right, which is number 2, that will be your BNC connector. So they are slightly different. So the F connector is what we see in our lab, and in some case when you purchase cable or you have cable installed by technician, you would see the BNC connector. We can connect multiple cables together, and for in and out we would use a splitter. We can have one cable for coming in for in signal and then 2 for out, and you will often see this at home when you would have a cable from the jack for the in, and then it would then connect to 2 cable for the out. One would be for your TV, the other one would be for your internet and so on. So your internet modem. So for the answer, when we look at number 3, we need to identify the differences between STP and UTP. The STP has the foil shield for interference protection. The STP is different and in that it's more durable and it's higher in cost compared to UTP. UTP doesn't have the shield. It is cheaper in cost, and it would have higher interference when you put the cable together. Then in the next section, after it touches on the splitter, it talks about video cable. And video cables, you would see these connecting to your display adapter and also your monitor. or your TV. We would have VGA, which is video graphic array, or DVI or HDMI and DisplayPort. So VGA was using analog signal. This is what you've seen on the older LCD screen or the older monitor, which is the CRT. HDMI is what we currently see in many of our television and monitor. It uses digital and analog, so it's able to deliver video and sound. Your DVI also uses digital analog and also along with the display port. So the table gives you the comparison and the resolution for your display. So when you're looking at 4K, you want to use HDMI cable and the display port. So for the lower resolution, we can use something like VGA and also DVI and other type of cable. S-video is what you've seen with the older type of also TV, appliances, and so on. S-video is now no longer integrated on the new modern system. So in the section for VGA, you would see that this is for analog display standard. There is Super VGA, and this is known as SVGA. That's going to give you 800 by 600 resolution. Now, the adapter would then rely on the cable to be connected to your monitor or your TV. And the connector is known as your DB15. So DB is the connector type as what you see. It looks like the shape of the D. 15 indicates the number of pin. F stands for female. So in the male, we would say that it's DB15M compared to the female where it has holes. That will be DB15F. On the DVI, DVI is known as your digital visual interface port. This is also used for video and in LED and LCD display. DVI port uses it's either DVI-D, which is for digital signal that's found in the LCD display, or DVI-I, which is used to support analog and digital. So the difference between the D and the I, as you can see, that the pin sets are different. The I would have the longer pin on the left side, whereas the I has the 4 pins on the left side, and the D would have one single long pin on the right, on the left side. So you would see that the connectors are different. Then your HDMI is your video card. Video card would support high definition multimedia interface. It's able to carry audio and video through a single cable. So now the resolution, it can go up to 4K, but we can also utilize it for the less of a resolution like 1920 by 1080 pixels. So you would see HDMI commonly implemented in your display monitor and television. You will also see mini HDMI and micro HDMI. They are different. The HDMI 1.3 or later specification is known as the mini HDMI. It uses Type-C connector. It's smaller than Type A plug in that, but it has the same pin configuration. The HDMI 1.4 is known as the micro HDMI, which is Type D, and it also has 9 pin, but the connector is smaller, and you would see that it would be classified as micro. So on the page 10, it shows you the different type of connector. Starting from the left, you have a DVI dual link, and you would see that the pins are set with no break. on the dual link. On the single link on the DVI-D, you would see that there's a break in the middle, even though they have both on the single pin on the left. On the HDMI, you would see it like this. It has a groove on the top right here. And the mini HDMI, which looks smaller and it's more oval and flat. Now the display port, you would see that it would have a rectangular edge compared to the HDMI where it's even on both sides. They are close in physical size, but its display port is slightly bigger. And for the mini display port, you would see it like this. You often see this in Apple systems. So DisplayPort, the throughput for that is high, so your video adapter, in all the modern video adapter, the high-end one would have HDMI and DisplayPort. So in this picture, it shows two types of adapter. One type at the top, you would have a mini HDMI on the left, which is right here. Then next to it, you would have a dual link where you have all the even pins. There's no break in the pins in the middle. So you would see on those. So in this adapter, which is an older video graphic card, it has a mini HDMI and a DVI. So you would find this maybe about 5 years ago or earlier. Now the one on the bottom, it's also an older adapter. This one has an HDMI, a VGA, and a dual link DVI-D. Unlike the DVI-I, the DVI-I has the 4 pins, where the DVI-D, you would have a single long pin. So on this adapter, you're able to connect your monitor using one of these. Or if you're using multiple monitor, you just have to use other type of cable. The display port is designed by VESA, which is Video Electronic Standard Association, and it offers the performance of the HDMI standard, but unlike HDMI and DVI, you're able to do multiple display that you can connect to a single display port connector. So you can split it. Now, it has 20 pins with 19 pin and 20 pin being used at 3 volts. And then the power for the cable is 500 mega. There are different classification in DisplayPort. For the later one, 1.3, you're able to adapt it for 4K, 5K, and 8K resolution. It is also can be integrated as what you see, what known as your Thunderbolt backward compatibility with the mini display port. So as you can see on this newer adapter, you would have the display port, the HDMI, and the DVI. So for A+, make sure that you know different type of video ports on your video adapter, or it could be on the motherboard. So to answer the next few questions, for question 4, what part of the network would include fiber optic cabling? That will be the backbone between the networks. So that means that could be your business or enterprise network with the internet service provider. So from the from service provider to your network, we want to use fiber. And then also now you would see that more fiber is integrated on the racks. So that way it will be fast at the centralized location. For question 5, it tells you that ABC Tech Company wants to install fiber optic between 2 branches, branch 1 and branch 2. These locations are 25 miles apart. What type of fiber optic cable should ABC Tech use? That will be a single mode fiber optic because it would go longer distance using laser light. For question 6, it asks you what are the differences between RG59 and RG6. RG59 is smaller in diameter slightly, and it has less shielding. It can be used for CCTV. RG6 has larger diameter. There's more shielding. It uses for satellite TV and cable internet. For question 7, it asks you what are the differences between BNC and F connector on coaxial. BNC connectors are used for CCTV cameras, video projectors, and BNC connectors are crimped to the coaxial cable using bayonet mount. The F connectors, which is what we had used in our lab, it's used for cable, satellite, fixed wireless internet to your wireless modem and TV service. F connectors are crimped or attached via compression tool to the coaxial cable. It has high quality using threaded connector. And also some F connector are used as push-on, but it won't be secure as it could be easily fall off. Now for question 8, we are going to identify the appropriate connector for our video adapter or graphic cards. On the left hand side, starting with number 1, when you see it's blue color coded, right, this is a VGA. It is a DB15F, which is, it has 15 pins female, and it uses DB connector. Number 2 is an HDMI, and HDMI is able to carry sound and video, and it has higher throughput than VGA, as VGA is only analog. For number 3, this is a DVI-I, and often you would see that the port is going to be either be black or white, and it would have 2 screws very similar to your VGA, but it is wider and it is more rectangular. For number 4, you would see the round connection. This is your S video. This is an older technology. You often see this on an older video adapter. For in number 9, it asks you what type of HDMI is commonly used in 1080 pixel monitor. That will be your version 1.4b. This is a different later classification of HDMI, which is designed for a little bit higher resolution than what you've seen in other type of video connection. For number 10, we are going to look at the type of HDMI cable. And we would refer to, starting with number 1, 19 pins. This is an HDMI, your standard HDMI type A. So that will be connecting to your monitor or even your system that would have HDMI port. For number 2, slightly smaller than the first one. This is HDMI type C, also known as mini HDMI. It is not as big compared to the regular HDMI, but it also has 19 pin. For number 3, which is smaller than the mini, this is the micro HDMI, also known as HDMI type D. They all can be used for display connection between systems and your display monitor or TV. We would look at the display port in the cable. On the left, for number 1, that is the larger connector. That's going to be your standard display port connector. On the right hand side, number 2, which is a smaller connection. This is going to be for mini display connector. And DisplayPort doesn't necessarily have to be with an Apple system. You do find PCs and other type of systems that require or has DisplayPort connection. For number 12, we would identify the appropriate port based on the image. So for number 1 of 12, you would see that this is a USB type 2.0. This is where you would connect external USB devices like drives, like flash drives, external hard drive, and even in some case we need to connect our Android phones or different type of adapter for your through the USB. So the A connection is always bigger and it's rectangular compared to other type which is smaller. So on the right, number 2, you should see USB Type-C, or also known as Thunderbolt 3. And in the picture, you can see the Thunderbolt logo at the top. USB Type-C sometimes can be used for not just charging, but can also be used for video if it is classified as a Thunderbolt 3. But not all USB are able to produce video signal. It asks you how many USB devices can a computer motherboard handle? 127. So when you have 127 devices connected to USB through a hub or extension, you would see that the transfer rate through that will bring back to one transfer area would be slower. On number 14, we would then need to label our USB cable. Starting with the top left, you would see that it would be your USB 3.1 Type-C. This is a newer type that we now incorporated with a lot of different type of device, right? Laptop, new laptop, you would see this. Next to it, you would see the Type A as it would be larger and rectangular. And this is 2.0 as it is color in black or white. That will be your 2.0, and that's Type A. Next to it, that will be USB 3.1 Type-C, or Type A, 3.1 Type A. This is rectangular, it's bigger, so it's Type A, but because it's 3.1, you would see the blue inner neck under the pin. Number 4, this is a micro B, as the connector is smaller. And the micro, it has 5 pin and it is oval on the bottom and flat at the top. It is much smaller than and it looks different than Type-C, where Type-C is a full oval on both top and bottom, where the micro is actually, there's a flat and then the oval on the bottom. Number 5 is going to be your USB 2.0 Micro B Super Speed. This is a 10 pin. So what they did was they expanded it so that way it would be securely connected so it doesn't fall off. So the super speed also gives you better throughput, better transfer rate. Number 6 is going to be your USB 2.0 Mini B, and this has the groove on the edges. This is used for different type of device charging and also connecting for data transfer. Number 7 is your USB 2.0 B. This is often found for printer cable that was incorporated with USB 2.0. That's slightly different than the one next to it, number 8, which is USB 3.0 B. And the difference between those two, not just physical, difference, but they have different transfer rates. So the 3.0, actually this should be 3.1. This is a much faster, and you would see that there's a blue color code inside there. So in the notes, it goes over different type of video cables, and then the lightning and the thunderbolt. Make sure that you know the differences, as A+ would require the information. And we would also see the type of cable shown here as what we've seen in our assignment. Now, on some of the dock station, this is often seen for laptop use. This is a dock station that would have different types of port, and you're able to use the cable to connect your laptop to it. Companies will implement this so you can charge your laptop, you can connect it to other projection, and you can connect it to the network. Okay, so here it gives you the label information. The USB section is on page 13 and onward, so it talks about different type of USB. So in USB, it stands for Universal Serial Bus. It was made to replace the PS2 or the MIDI DIN for mouse and keyboard. And since the earlier standardized version, we have gone from USB 1 to 2, now 3.1, and then eventually 4 is in the works and it will be later released. So USB is often found for your system to connect to external devices or transfer data. USB-C is the standard that would be the upgrade from the 2.0 for the 2.0 and the 3.0. So USB 2 that has been upgraded to 3.1, and it can handle 2 and 3 for the type of USB. So USB 2 is known as high speed, USB 3.0 is known as super speed, and USB 3.1 is known as super speed plus or Gen 2. So as we transition to newer type of USB, we would see that the speed improvement there, it can only handle up to 127 devices. Now, the hubs, it can be either bus powered, meaning that you can use your port connection to power the system, like you can use that to charge your phone, or you can have it so a computer can be used to charge your phone. So power is then transferred through the bus channel to then your device. The self-powered hub is then for that you would be able to connect to your AC or your wall outlet. And they all work with 2.0 and 3.1. So here you can see different type of USB hub and also multiple USB on the adapter. So USB 3.1 Gen 1 was a new name for 3.0, and then USB 3.1 Gen 2 is the upgraded version of the Gen 1, in that they had improved the transfer rate and the features on the USB. So here we would see 3.0B standard, and then micro B, and also known as the super speed, and then so on. Then you also have type A, C, and the A, like I said, is rectangular and larger, and the C is more oval. So you will have female and male connector for your USB. The one on the left is going to be type A, and that is a male USB type A. On number 2 on the right, that will be USB type A, 2.0 type A, female. And so you also can use adapter. So here it shows you 3, that's a mini AB. And then for the USB type B, that would just be on the smaller connector. They also have mini 4-pin and 5 pins. They're slightly different in size there. Here we would see on the go and also type A female. This is used for tablet or a phone. So for the Ethernet, you can have Ethernet to USB, and this is what you've seen with USB 3.0 or the gigabit Ethernet. So you might be able to adapt it this way as well. So in the next questions, it's going to ask you to clarify the differences between USB 3.1 Gen 1 and 3.2 Gen 2. The 3.1 Gen 2 supports Type C and reversible connector, where the Gen 1 did not. The Gen 1 did not support that. So in the next part, we are going to talk about data storage cable. And so in the next section, it talks about different type of cable here. You would have the serial, which uses RS232. And serial cable is used to transfer data. So serial ports is going to be slower as it's going to go 1 bit at a time, where parallel ports, it's able to send multiple bits at the same time. So now serial cable was then be replaced with USB, where it would be much faster and more universal, adapt in other type of devices. Hardware cable, we would see that it is a SATA cable, and SATA stands for Serial Advanced Technology Attachment Cable. So serial ATA or SATA cable they have different classification, and as we improve in the classification in different version, you would have higher transfer rate. When you also see external SATA, which is used for external drives to be able to mount the data or access the data. So here shows you different type of cable. For number 1, this is a right angle SATA 6 gigabit per second cable, and it has a locking clip. So on the top, you would see the locking clip right here. It allows it to be able to connect. So when you unplug it, you gotta make sure that you press down on it to be able to unlock it. Next to it is your standard SATA 1.5 to 3 gigabit per second cable N. And it would also have some kind of label here so you can see. Then number 3 is your straight SATA 6 gigabit per second N cable with the clip. And then on the right hand side, that will be your eSATA. So in the older hard disk drive, you would use a flat ribbon cable, and it has a color on the edge. This is known as your IDE cable, and that stands for Integrated Drive Electronics. This cable is then being replaced with your SATA cable, and also we can install the drive directly onto the port using M.2, So we will not need the cable for that unless it's located elsewhere where we need to have a cable to transfer. So IDE would be like this. And you notice that there is a missing pin. This missing pin is going to be lined up with the missing pin on the back of the hard drive. So on the hard drive, you would have a data connection and a power connection. This is used for the data connection. On the edge of the ribbon cable, you would see a stripe, either pink or blue. That stripe is to indicate that that is going to be pin 1. Now, when people plug it in backwards, they probably damage the pin that would be pushed against a missing pin. And you would have the groove at the top where it would match up with the groove for the back of the hard drive. So it is pretty difficult to mix it up, especially when you install, unless you are not paying attention, then that could happen. SCSI, we call this SCSI, and it stands for Small Computer System Interface. This is an older technology, but still some organizations still use this. It was later replaced with SATA cable. However, it was used for connection to SCSI drive. And so the advantage of using SCSI drive and SCSI cable is that it is much faster than your flat ribbon IDE cable that we saw previously. Now, it says that it could be even 7 times, sometimes 15 faster. So this is the type of the cable that you would see. It would have the flat metal connection here with the pins inside. And so you would install it by aligning this to the device, and then you would screw in on both sides, similar to the VGA. We would also have adapters. So if you have an older display monitor or some kind of projection that uses like a DVI, and you need to adapt it, you can buy an adapter. So DVI to HDMI, USB to Ethernet, and DVI to VGA, and so on. So here it shows you different type of adapter. We can adapt to a specific port. If we don't have it on the system, we will be able to use the adapter for that. And then here we would also see VGA and DVI, DVI-I and DVI-I single link. So the common connectors are listed at this table, but it doesn't all include everything. You would have network connectors down to USB and also storage. So make sure that you know the differences in connectors, the type of cable that you would use for different devices, in which you will be asked on final exam quiz and also CompTIA certification. So for 15, we already addressed the difference between 3.1 Gen 1 and Gen 2. For 16, we would list the type of hard drive cables. We would have SATA, serial ATA, external SATA, that's used for external hard drive, IDE, which uses 40 pin with a missing pin, and that is the flat ribbon cable that's used for hard drive. SCSI is used to connect the system that would have storage devices in SCSI. And for 17, it asks you what is the maximum number of SCSI drive that can be daisy chained together. That means that we connect one to the other and the other to another one. The total would be either 7 drives or 15 drives, depending on the version of SCSI that you're using. So this concludes my video lecture for CIS25 Unit 3. Please let me know if you have any questions. You can use the notes and the chapter. So in the next week, we will cover the second part of Chapter 3. So make sure that you read through the chapter. And thank you for watching my video.